doing today, guys? Today we're discussing 12 live jazz records that I love. This is going to be a little more convoluted in some ways than a lot of the other episodes because a lot of the jazz canon is actually recorded live. And most of what's even done in the recording studio is tracked live. You can't really multi-track jazz and have great jazz. I think part of the issue with 80s jazz is 80s recording methods. When you are multi-tracking somebody, it's like me having a conversation, speaking my parts without hearing your answers. And then you go in there and respond to my questions in my dialogue, but it's not the same. You can't really respond to me because I've already put all my answers down. So you're going to come back and the dialogue's lost. Multi-tracking was a death bell for the spirit and the consciousness of jazz, the emoting quality of jazz. Me being inspired by what my friend is saying and playing, I can't do that in that multi-track setting. It's gone. And the music reflects it. It becomes stale, stagnant, canned, easy listening shit. Sorry. You want good jazz from the 80s? Get those Concord records that are all recorded live. See what I'm saying? If you're at the Concord Jazz Festival and you're tracking that stuff, that's going to sound great. You got some virtuoso in the studio with a band tracking around them. Stale. Canned. Might have a long expiration date on it, but it ain't going to be no good from the second you can that shit. Garbage. Number one on this list of a dozen live records I love is this Ella Fitzgerald Billie Holiday set at Newport, probably 56 or so. Newport was the famous jazz festival, of course, in Newport, Rhode Island. It happened every spring, and they brought a lot of the greats out from New York and even around the country. I don't think you can have a better representation of live jazz than the great Verve bands and orchestras that were accumulated, and Ella and then Billie emoting over that. Ella's just a virtuoso in a very real, genuine sense. She's not trying to be something. She just naturally has an exuberance, a joy, a thrill of being able to play through the notes and the chords and the scales and hear notes that horn players hear. She hears them and chooses alternate melodic pathways throughout a piece because she's that brilliant. She doesn't need to take the same melodic phrasing for every step of the lyric like a pop singer does. She'll sing each line with its own inflection. That's... what was that? Thank you, Armstrong. Then we have Billie Holiday on the other side, and Billie's the other side of that coin, where her range is somewhat limited in terms of octaves and notes, but her emoting is top of the mark. Her struggle, her pain, and when you hear her with the live group, she'll sing behind, she'll sometimes sing ahead. She just finds the pathways through that are always the most compelling. And sometimes her approach is minimal and simplistic from the vocal phrasing perspective, but from the insight that she inflects into that, from her experience and her background, it takes, no matter what the lyric is, and gives it a depth and a pain and a sorrow that's pretty unrivaled in music history. My second choice here are Blakey. You gotta love Arthur Blakey. We've talked Art Blakey on numerous episodes. This record is a tour de force by some of the most brilliant musicians of the era. I believe it's from 53, 54. And this record has various incarnations. Its first 3 10-inches that come out over the course of a few years. And then it was packaged with this in a volume 2 with that cover. And then it's eventually given this cover, which I actually like the best of the bunch. I think that's a great classic Blue Note look. It's still very modern to this day. And Blue Note's art department is unrivaled. But you got Horace Silver, Curly Russell, you got Clifford Brown and Lou Donaldson, and then Blakey's putting down that power. It's just a cooking set. And for me, probably the most important part of this set is Clifford Brown. You get to hear Clifford Brown really on fire. And I think it gives you some insight into where Clifford probably would have gone in the late 50s, into the 60s, had he gotten the chance to play further. And as the music developed, and as his own career trajectory went forward, I think Clifford had a lot left to say to us. It's really a shame we lost him at such a young age. But so these 3 are all the same set. This is 2 volumes, this has 2 volumes, this one has 3 volumes. And like I said, it's as good live hard bop as you're ever gonna find. So that's the Blakey group. Bill Evans. Everybody loves Bill Evans. If they don't, they should. Bill Evans is one of the most beautiful players on the piano. Had the respect of both the black and the white musicians. Records a lot of records at Riverside. This was, of course, recorded at the Village Vanguard. I'm going to pull 4 records that were recorded live at the Vanguard. Just an amazing club that housed all the greats over the course of its opening through closing. I love Bill. Most of you probably already know and love Bill. I just couldn't imagine doing a favorite live record thing and not including Bill. LaFaro and Motion are on this with him, Paul Motion. But part of this dozen record things, I'm not just trying to do the 12 most important or the 12 most popular. I'm always trying to keep I love as part of the equation. And there's no question I love that Birdland record. There's no question I've loved this record for years. I have a CD in my car. I drive around doing deliveries for my brother, listening to Bill Evans. And I don't think I'll ever tire of Bill Evans at any time in my life. Another Blue Note session I really love. This is some cooking stuff. It's cooking with fire. Hot, hot, hot. The band includes Lou Donaldson, Donald Byrd, Hank Mobley, and Eddie McFadden on the guitar. Of course, Art's playing the organ with the bass pedals as well. Jimmy Smith is just... I do a series on Jimmy Smith, which you should check out if you haven't seen. He's a virtuoso, on par with Armstrong, on par with Parker, on par with Coltrane, Monk, just in terms of his innovation and how he reinvents his instrument. He brings the entire game to the organ, and there's a lot of imitators of Jimmy Smith, but none really equal him. This, of course, has a part 2 as well, which a lot of Jimmy Smith's live dates do. But I love this record in part because it has an incredible energy to it. It just has like a fury. If you want more information on Jimmy Smith, I recommend you go to my Jimmy Smith series, because there's definitely some stuff there worth digging into. This is one of my favorite Sonny Rollins records. And Rollins' career to me is up and down. I love the bridge record on RCA, but some of the other RCA stuff is a little bit canned, a little bit. He disappears at numerous times. I'm not a huge fan of his contemporary stuff. It's okay, but it's not. It lacks an intensity for me. But here on the Vanguard and a few of his other Blue Note titles, Riverside titles, his Impulse titles, he's really in a great place there. And the band on him with this, it's a pretty small group if I recall. Will Beware on bass, Elvin Jones is on drums, and then they switch out Donald Bailey and Pete LaRock on a couple tracks, so it must be from a couple different nights. But I've always felt Rollins on this record. I've always felt him kind of burning, having something on his mind. It's like he's got something he wants to say and share. And I feel all players, all artists are at their best when they have something they want to say. The tenor scene. This is, of course, live at Minton's Playhouse. And Johnny Griffin, Little Giant, Lockjaw Davis, a taller gentleman. These two together make some great records. Griffin, Lockjaw are fun, fiery, dueling, masters of expression, masters of soul, masters of the blues, masters of the ballad. They both can just do all of that really well. And they kind of dovetail and interlock and go back and forth, and over the course of their career they do quite a bit of stuff together. They're one of my favorite sax duos. Here we find them really cooking. This is probably from the late 50s. I don't see it right off the top of my head here. It has Junior Mance on the piano, Ben Rowley on the drums, and Larry Gales on the bass. But it's one of those Prestige records that really captures what Prestige does well. Fairly straight, middle of the road, classic traditional jazz with a real element of soul and tempo. You know, I mean, they just really know how to cook. I love that record. I listen to it a lot. Absolutely one of my favorite live records. Is this fantastic Shelly Manne and his men at the Black Hawk, which of course has 4 volumes. And you really should have all 4. But this version of Summertime, which is just to me a great song always, to me this is as good a version of Summertime as there is. Joe Gordon on the trumpet is just wonderful. Victor Feldman's on the piano. Richie Kamuka plays the tenor sax, and Monty Budwig's on the bass. These guys go between cooking to mid-tempo to the slower tempos, and it really kind of shows you the mixed groups they have on the West Coast. But these West Coast cats weren't playing; they were doing their thing. You know, there's these 4 Black Hawk records will really kind of give you some insight into just how great West Coast jazz is, how modern it is, and how much the cool label is kind of a misnomer. There is some West Coast cool, but it's not these type of records. These are modern, hard bop, contemporary, explosive records. They're not just cool. They're saying a lot more than that. Of course, there's plenty of cool on the West Coast, but if you ask me cool, Paul Desmond's cool. That's as cool as it gets. Paul Desmond is the Pink Panther incarnate. You know, that's as cool as it gets. But to call all West Coast jazz cool jazz, forget what the books are telling you. That's totally missing the point. Another record that's recorded, Kamuka. Kamuka's kind of an undervalued guy. He's got some great records on RCA with Al Cohn. Another record at the Vanguard. This is Kenny Burrell in a trio setting, and it's in Japanese, of course. I can't tell you who the bass and drums are, but I love every Kenny Burrell record I got. And being as Kenny Burrell, I play this a lot, which means I love it a lot. And to me, how often you play something, that's all you need to know about if you love it or not. I could say I love a record and I play it once every couple of years. I'm just saying I love it. If I love it, it manages to get back on my turntable fairly frequently. And of course, that gets tougher and tougher the more records you got. But the more records you got, the more you play something, the more you really love that record. Because a lot of stuff there you haven't heard, but you still want to hear that one right now. So I don't think you can ever go wrong with anything Kenny Burrell does. He's one of the stalwarts of jazz guitar. He's a sideman on infinite projects. He's around for absolutely forever. A guy I can't recommend enough, honestly. Now, this is something I'm not going to do very often. I'm very rarely going to pick a release from outside the jazz canon. And for my definitions, if it didn't come out between 55 and 65, the jazz canon for me is that era. And even Rudy Van Gelder said a lot of the stuff that's alternate takes was there because the musicians deemed it to be so. The musicians didn't want that take out there. It's not to say there isn't some interesting alternate takes to give you some insight, but most of these modern issuing of alternate take sessions and lost recordings, a lot of it's just money grabs. A lot of it's just a slightly variated version that usually has a flaw or a stop in it somewhere that was put aside for a reason. The true missing albums of artists, we're talking 60, 70 years ago, people. That stuff's all been found at this point. You know, there's not a lot you could add to the classic jazz canon of that period at this point. That being said, this to me is a bit of an exception. It comes out probably in 04, 03, somewhere like that. But it shows Monk and Coltrane together in 57, 58. This is one of his periods where Coltrane's not with Miles. And he's playing with Monk. And it's a bit like Kill Bill, watching her learn to be a Kung Fu master. It's a bit like watching Luke Skywalker learn how to be a Jedi. Monk has found his space and place and time. And he's become kind of the guru, and has influenced jazz across the board. And Coltrane's still kind of searching for his identity, and playing with Miles as Miles' sidekick, that was kind of what his label was at that point. And once he comes to play with Monk, I think Monk was an epiphany, a revelation to John. John, playing with Miles for decades, I don't think would have grown like he did playing with Monk for that few 4 or 5 months he did. Monk has stripped away the rules. He's stripped away the barriers and smashed through them. He's alternated chords. He's playing with dissonance. He's rearranging structure and rhythm and just the articulation of all the different elements. But he's always finding a way to make it function and not just be complete chaos. That's the challenge of dissonance. That's the challenge of whenever you're going to tinker with the rules, you still have to make it be enjoyable for people. And you can hear Coltrane here. He's still very much playing like he plays with Miles here. Those long lines, some staccato stops and pauses and then going again. But I still think he's hearing Monk, and he's developing his ear. He's developing his chops. He's developing his sensibilities. Monk is teaching just by doing what he does. And I don't think you learn from a musician listening to their stuff the same way you do when you play with them. And you're forced to be on stage and improvise and respond and react to just what that guy's doing. I think Monk was just a revelation to John. And I think John grows in leaps and bounds once he's played with Monk for that short period. And we all got to thank the jazz gods for what Monk does, because I think he really pushes Train down that road. This is a great Miles session, a live record. I've always enjoyed some of the tracks on here. Bye Bye Blackbird to me is fantastic, and to me really is one of the great versions of that song. All of You is fantastic. It's a swinging group. It's catching Miles in a bit of a transitional period. But if I had to pick some Miles I really loved live, this one came to mind. But what I really wanted to show you for Miles Davis live, and I don't have nothing on vinyl. Actually, I do have a compilation record that came out in probably early 90s maybe, the Plug Nickel. Well, here's the complete Plug Nickel CD box set. It's every set. A couple of CDs are double discs, so it's like 8 or 9 discs. And you don't buy the Miles Davis complete Plug Nickel box set to hear Miles Davis. You buy this box set because Herbie Hancock, Tony Williams, Ron Carter, and Wayne Shorter are all gonna blow your socks off. And being it's from a week of sets at the same club, they're gonna play the same songs quite a bit. And it's really a revelation hearing the different versions of If I Were a Bell and some of the other great tracks that are on here. When I Fall in Love, My Funny Valentine, Round About Midnight. A lot of these songs show up repeatedly. If I Were a Bell, Sell It by Starlight, Walkin', I Fall in Love Too Easily. Again, it's a great set to have, and it really illustrates the level of musicianship of Miles' second quintet. And Miles is great as well, but I often feel like Miles is just being pulled along by these 4 young horses. You know, if they're a sled team, those 4 horses out in front, Miles is just trying his best to keep up and not trip over his own legs. No slight on Miles. It's just those 4 kids are all such virtuosos that there's no question as to why Miles brought those 4 in. They were all going to be Coltrane-like in how they changed the music, and they certainly were. Another live record I love dearly and play frequently is this Wynton Kelly, Wes Montgomery record. It's on Verve. It's from the mid-60s, probably 65 or so. Smoking at the Half Note. Paul Chambers and Jimmy Cobb round out the group. It's outstanding live, groove-based guitar and piano with a wonderful sense of chemistry. To me, this is one of my favorite Verve records. Being outside of the studio setting, it really gives the band a chance to shine. So that's a record worth finding and looking for. And then my last record I want to show you here, we're going to return to the Vanguard one more time. we're going to see exactly where Monk pushes Train. Coltrane live with the Vanguard, to me, is a seminal live record. The changes in Train between this and Kinda Blue, between this and Steamin', Workin', Kirkin', Relaxin', Train's growing a lot. He's done Giant Steps, he's done my favorite things, he's done so many things. But here, the Monk impact, I think, really starts to come out. He starts to really find his own singular voice. It's with the great quartet, of course, with the addition of Eric Dolphy. Actually, Reggie Workman's on the bass on this, I forgot. Not Jimmy Garrison. But this is Chasing the Train, makes up all the side 2. And Train wasn't a short story writer. Train didn't write short prose and nice, neat little poems. Coltrane writes epics. And those epic tales are going to go on for a long time. And Chasing the Train is a great example of that great epic storyteller. And he fights the dragons, he slays the evil knights, he saves the princess, the kingdom rejoices, and yet there's always a new enemy on the frontier. And he's always willing to raise that sword and shield up and say, let's go! So you gotta dig those Vanguard records, especially Bill Evans, especially the Coltrane. It's live jazz in some ways is greater than the studio counterparts. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great studio recordings, but most great jazz studio recordings are tracked live. So the transition to recording a live session versus the studio session, there's not going to be a great deal of departure. It's the reason why when Miles in the first quintet goes in and records Workin', Cookin', Steamin', Relaxin', they can turn all that stuff on one take. They've been doing all this shit live for months. These guys are top of their game. And any jazz group that works together for a while has created a chemistry, a dialogue, and a language, and inside jokes that they can kind of reference each other back and forth. It's a communication. And in the case of Coltrane, he's going to tell you most of the story. The other cats are just going to lay down some of the framework. But live jazz is a wonderful thing. There's an infinite list of great live jazz recordings you can choose from. You can pick out 12 live recordings almost on every label. And be like, I love these 12 on Verve, I love these 12 on Blue Note, I love these 12 live albums on Prestige. But I try to give you a nice cross-section of great live jazz stuff. My name is the Jazz Shepherd. Dan, y'all be safe out there. Talk to y'all soon. Peace.